This, when you say, you mean this Congress versus the first one I was in?
This Congress versus the
Not
first one.
pre-me.
Right.
Let me think about that. I would say that in some ways, there are some folks that came in with my year who had big, bold dreams for what they were going to be able to accomplish. And that's good. I have a lot of those myself. But the reality of a divided government, and what I mean by that is Democrats controlling the Senate, Democrats controlling the White House, that reality over time made it clear that at least until we get more folks that agree with us, then it's going to be hard to make big, massive, bold changes, for example, and that some of the victories will have to be incremental. And a reform here, a reform there, and so I think, so I would say first and foremost, and it's a complex situation because you have, first of all, you have 435 personalities, and when you start a new Congress, some of them are complete, some of them are new, and never been in Congress for a day. Some of them are came in when I did, so we've had the same exact time frame to cover. Others came in 2 years before. So you have to use some broad generalizations, which are sometimes are unsatisfactory. But I would say, number one, there are a lot of people that came in with me who have seen, and I've seen it myself, that sometimes the small victories, like I said, a reform here, reform there, change here, change there, sometimes those are all we're going to get with the current construct, with the current split in the government. So that would be number one. So that would be that some they've become more practical, some of them. Some of them are brand new. And so, meaning in this Congress, so what you see is you have a situation where you can talk with a colleague who came in with you and reference a past event that those new folks can't reference because they weren't there. Okay? So, and there are, and this is true going back to when I first got there, you don't just have Republicans, conservative Republicans and Democrats. You have, the way you used to have some conservative Democrats, you really don't have many of those, if any, you really don't have any anymore. But in our party, we have what I think are fairly described as sort of hybrid conservative libertarians. And some of them might describe themselves as purely libertarian. And so it's a complex makeup. And sometimes if we can't get enough Republicans on a vote, it may be that the ones that weren't with us were maybe more of a libertarian bent. So it's a complex makeup. I would also say that, the Speaker has he has been through a lot of fights and trying to hold a majority together to get to that magic 218, which is what you need to pass something in the House. And he's got the battle scars to show that. And so I think that, and of course, he's a human being that, and these battles take a personal toll on energy and excitement and all that, and so it's a very it's a always dynamic situation, because the other thing is you can take someone who is a traditional conservative on, say, Second Amendment rights or taxes or whatever, but then you throw something like NSA into the mix. Let's take me for example. Okay? I describe myself as a common sense conservative. I think I'm a conservative. I'm pretty practical, meaning I'll take a small victory rather than have no victory at all. And I think the Farm Bill for me was an example of that. Did I like everything in it? No.
Okay.
If you wait until, but I voted for it. If you wait until you find a piece of legislation that you agree with 100%, you will never support a piece of legislation. It is impossible to find a perfect piece of legislation unless, of course, you wrote it and no one changed it, right?
Right.
So with every piece of legislation, you have to weigh the likes in it versus the dislikes. What do you like about it, and what do you not like about it? Which one outweighs the other in your view, based on what your constituents want and what's important to your constituents? And with every piece of legislation, each legislator, each representative has to weigh that. And but let's take this example. So I think it's fair characterization that I am conservative but pragmatic.
Okay.
I saw a National Journal ranking the other day that had me as very conservative, and you can take a look at that. But on some things, for example, I will differ with leadership and differ with some other colleagues of mine that are traditional conservatives. And the NSA wiretapping stuff is one of them. I am a big believer in privacy. And obviously hopefully it's obvious, I'm a big believer in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Fourth Amendment. I believe fundamentally, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Smith v. Maryland, which is a 1979 case, and this is probably more detailed than you wanted, but I believe that case was wrongly decided by the Supreme Court. That case basically said that business records can be obtained without a warrant. And that has been interpreted to mean if one business record can be obtained without a warrant, then 1 trillion business records can be. Yeah. I have a problem with that. Let me tell you why. And Thurgood Marshall wrote the dissent, a dissent in that opinion. I think Blackman wrote the majority opinion. Well, I agreed with Thurgood Marshall, and he and I don't agree with his opinions all the time, obviously, but this is one where I think he made a good point. The majority reasoned that you have no expectation of privacy in who you call from your home. I find that completely ridiculous. In fact, a lot of us might not call certain people if we thought the public would know, right?
Right.
So in any event, I have a problem with that, so I have voted to do something about this mass collection of records, and that may not fit what some other traditional conservatives would support. And I'm real clear about it. I think Smith v. Maryland I understand it's the law.
Okay.
I get that.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that it is constitutional, or that the arguments about that case being the law and current law, I get that, it is current law. But I make two arguments. Number one, I think it's wrongly decided. But even if it's not wrongly decided, I think the Supreme Court, there's a chance, it may be a slim chance, but I think there's a chance the Supreme Court could revisit that and say, we never meant for that principle to apply to trillions of people's data. I have a real problem with that, and I've expressed that problem, and I just think the founders, if they, I think the founders, obviously they're not here, but if they were and explained this to them, I think that they would completely reject the idea of mass accumulation of data like that. It's a complex group of people in the House, even within our conference, is my point.
You're saying also a learning curve.
There's a learning curve yes, and I will tell you, my experience as a staff member has helped me immensely.
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes experience can be spun as a bad thing, but it has been very helpful to me to know people who can give advice, and to having spent some time as a staff member, as a staff attorney, has been very helpful.